like to think of this presentation of kind of like the book, or not really a book, but there is a book called What to Expect When You're Expecting. So it's kind of like what to expect when you're expecting bees, all kind of the different things that you kind of need to know in order to figure out if you want to keep bees on your property or not. So in here, we have, during the summer season, in these two hives, this one is our first year hive, and then one next to it where you can kind of see it is a second year hive. So in this hive, during the summertime, or in both of them, you may have anywhere up to like 80,000 bees in it. During the winter time, you're gonna have approximately 10,000 to 15,000 bees in the hive. And I want you all to think of them as pets. So things that you have to provide them with are food, water, shelter. You have to be their grocer. You have to be their veterinarian, basically. So there's a lot of things that people don't realize before they get bees. They think they can just take bees and put them in a box and they're good to go. So we're gonna kind of go through that. So first of all, we need to talk about what tools you kind of need, and there are a lot of different tools. As you get into more in depth in beekeeping, there's people that add on tools as they get more experienced. Some things that you really need to have are a smoker, and I have my smoker already lit inside so you can kind of see that. The reason why we need a smoker is it calms the bees down. And sometimes you don't need it, sometimes you do. It all depends on how they're feeling that day. And let me take out my matches. What I do is I collect spruce cones from my backyard and sticks. Some people will buy burlap. I like free things, so I collect whatever is in my yard to use as smoker fuel. So again, sometimes people want to pay an additional cost for that. Smoker fuel, again, I like free things. This is, there's different hive tools out there, and this is one of them. And it's got a little hook, which is very helpful to move things around. Actually, my mentor, Kent Williams in Kentucky, is the person who designed this. And it helps to move things around. This sharp end is great because bees stick their hive together with something called propolis, and it's basically sap from plants. And it's kind of like the caulk in your house. So they like everything kind of nice and snug because they don't want the wind and the rain and in the sleet to get in their hive, especially during the winter time. So they like everything nice and stuck together. So that is important. I think Menards has tools like this. They're like around $4, and we can kind of talk about how much startup costs will be to start up a hive, because that's important to know as well. And then you have a hive suit. I always protect my face because bees are drawn to carbon dioxide from your breath. And they're like, hey, there's someone coming into my hive. I feel the need to defend it. And they go straight for the face. You don't want that to happen, so you want to wear a veil over your head. There are some people who feel comfortable not wearing a veil. I am not one of those people. And some people wear just a jacket. Some people have the full onesie. I just have the jacket and I wear long pants. And then there are a variety of gloves. Again, some people do not wear gloves when they work with the bees. It's all preference as you get more and more comfortable working with the bees. So I'm going to put these on. Some people use natural gloves, which are kind of like your surgical gloves. So I got my Hive Tool, and I should mention there's different parts to the bee hive. So these are called deeps, and this is your brood chamber. This is where the queen stays and lays her eggs. And this is basically the roof of the house. It's called the outer cover. And then I wish I could tilt this, but each one of these could potentially weigh up to 80 pounds, and they're a little bit of a challenge to move without one of my coworkers. So yeah, I'm not gonna tilt it. And so this is the inner cover, which is kind of like the attic of their house. And if I find the queen, that's really exciting. I don't always find her, and that's okay. When I'm doing a hive inspection, the main things I'm doing is making sure that there are eggs present and that there is brood present. So brood is, or larva, bees go through metamorphosis just like butterflies and moths do. So the queen lays an egg, and then that egg will hatch and turn into a larva. And then they go into a pupa stage and rest for a certain amount of days, and then they emerge as adult bees, whether it be a worker bee, which is a female, a drone bee, which is a male, or the queen. So I'm going to move this frame out of the way. And again, everything is stuck together, so I'm using the edge of my Hive Tool to manipulate things. And I'm going to see if I can get it here. Okay, so we got some cool things to show you in here. I'm going to do a quick once over to see if I can find the queen. Okay. This is not the queen. Where'd he go? If you look right here by the edge of my Hive Tool, you're going to see a very large bee with a very round butt and almost like fly eyes. That is a drone. That is a male bee. And he does not have a stinger. Worker bees and queen bees have stingers. They're modified egg laying devices. And hopefully you can see that. It's hard when I'm outside to be able to show you that kind of stuff. So are you able to see that? The drone? He just moved, he's right here.
I think we can see him. I can see him. Mm-hmm.
And then what you're seeing here, this is hard to manipulate. Okay, so what you're seeing right here, this kind of brown pattern right here, this is what we call capped broods. So this is, the larva have gone into a pupa stage, and this is flat. So I know this is worker brood and not drone brood. Drone brood is going to be very bumpy, kind of like popcorn-ish, and that's something to look out for, that you don't have too many drones in there, because if you don't see the presence of a queen and you got a lot of drone brood, that means you are maybe queenless. And this guy is super cool, or I should say this girl. If you watch her move around, and my glasses are going to fall off. If you watch her move around, you're going to see a little bit of red on her legs, and that is actually pollen. See her right there. She's moving around. And we also have a larva in here as well, the kind of white C shapes that you're seeing in there. Are you able to see that?
I don't know if I see, maybe a little bit, maybe a little bit.
Let me adjust my glasses because they just fell off. I don't normally have that happen. So this shiny stuff that you see in the corner is nectar that they haven't turned into honey yet. Honey has to be capped with wax in order for it to be considered honey. And let's, right in here is where, if you see that white area, the white stuff inside, that is actually larvae. And again, it's really hard.
Yeah, I can see it now.
So those are just a few things. Here is that worker right here, if I can get her to move. Oh, she just fell on my keyboard. She had red pollen on her legs, which is really cool. All right, I'm gonna put this frame back. So we did see larvae in there, and I wasn't gonna look for the queen, and it's very hard to show eggs on the screen because they are smaller than a grain of rice. So yeah, that would be very difficult, but I do have a slide with the pictures of the eggs on it. Excuse me. So does anybody have any questions about what's going on in here right now at this point?
We do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So Paul D asks, when manipulating a hive, is it tricky not to crush or kill any bees?
Yes, it is, especially when you put the inner cover on. Typically we use smoke to maybe move them out of the way, or there's something called a hive brush. I use a turkey feather because we have lots of turkeys out here. Actually, there's one right in front of me. And they drop feathers, so it's actually easy to pretty much manipulate and move the bees out of the way before you put the covers back on so you don't squish any. You always want to make slow movements while you are checking on your bees because you don't want to inadvertently crush the queen either. That is a pretty big deal when you accidentally crush your queen. You don't want to do that. So small movements, you don't want to move quickly. If you're in a rush, the day you want to check your bees, don't do it because they're going to sense that. And they might not be too happy about that either. And that's when you're more likely to get stung. So there are different kind of things that happen with bees that are pretty much always going to happen. You're always going to get stung. Not always, but you should anticipate the possibility of getting stung. Your bees are occasionally, you could lose your entire hive. It really depends. So I'm going to just put this back together. And also I'm going to show you this. So once these bees have kind of filled up this box, we are going to put this on top, which is our honey super. So this is what we call a medium super. There are small supers, and this is a deep super. Each one of these is a deep super, or you can call it a brood box. If there are any ladies out there thinking about doing beekeeping on their own, I would suggest using two not 2 mediums, 2 smalls for each brood chamber, because that's going to lighten your load when you move things. Again, these can be 70 to 80 pounds, and this is a lot of extra weight to be hauling around. So if you don't feel like you can lift that kind of stuff, and if you don't have someone to help you lift, you can always use those smaller boxes in order to help you manipulate things the way you want to. So I'm going to close this up. I'm going to go kind of slow. And they're pretty, these ladies are being pretty chill with me today, so that's a good thing. Sometimes they can be in a mood. They're kind of like people, you know, they vary differently in their temperament day to day. So that can be a challenging thing. So I'll just leave this out here. So that's a little bit of a hive inspection. And I think right now we can transition to the PowerPoint if you're okay with that. When we start losing daylight, the bees are starting to go back into their home for the evening. And when we start losing daylight, that's the time where they get kind of cranky when I'm checking in on them. So I wanted to do this part first with them before I did anything else.
We do have a couple other questions if you just want to answer them quick.
Sure.
Michelle asked what the Hive Tool was called. Is there a special name for it?
So the Hive Tool, and I'm going to go through this. There are different bee catalogs out there, and they all have different types of Hive tools. So there's like an Italian tool. This is called the Kent Williams tool, or I think it's KW Hive Tool, and they sell this through Kelly Bees, and they were by Man Lake Bee Supply. So that's the name of this particular Hive Tool. And I forget what they're called when you go to Menards, but they have them there. It might just be a pry bar. I can't remember what they're called. And then also Farm and Fleet is starting to sell beekeeping equipment as well. So you can purchase a Hive Tool from them. I don't recommend buying any of their frames for the inside of here, those movable things that I showed you, that's called a frame. I wouldn't buy any of those because they're done with staples and not nails, and they're not as strong as what you would get if you purchased them from another a reputable beekeeping company or making your own.
And she also was wondering where you get the boxes from. Are you going to be covering that in the PowerPoint?
Yeah, I'm going to be covering kind of like the supply chain of where you would order things.
Great.
So that is on my list of things.
Awesome.
And I need to get this off my computer. They're on there. Okay. So I am going to so you guys don't see me moving throughout the hallway, I'm going to stop my video. Move. Are you recording again?
I am, yes. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm putting my email in the first slide. So in case you have questions after the program, you're more than welcome to email me. I've been working partially from home, partially from where directly. So I may not be present at where if you happen to call. So email is really good to just shoot me an email if you have any questions. So I wanted to show you this. This is what we typically look for in a hive when we're looking to see if there's a presence of the queen. And down at the very bottom, you'll see kind of little tiny grains of rice. Those are the eggs. And then you see larvae at various ages. So that is what you're looking for. It's nice to see capped brood in there as well, that kind of brown coating that I showed you earlier. But this is really what you're looking for if you can't find the queen, because again, some people just go in quickly to make sure that the hive is okay. They don't necessarily find the queen because she likes to run and hide. Especially there's a type of bee, I mean, all of them are Italian, I mean, not Italian, but all of them are Apis mellifera, but you have different, what we call breeds of honeybees and carniolans, which is typically what I work with. The queens tend to be runners. They run and hide, and they're a darker bee. So I like to ask people, like, before they make the commitment to keep bees, again, it's like taking care of pets. You know, you want to make sure that they're well taken care of. You just don't put them in a box, even though they are insects. Why do you want to keep bees? So these are some different things that I thought about that I've heard from people, is bees are endangered species and I want to help them. And we'll talk about that. I want them on my property for pollination. I want to keep bees so I can have the honey. I want to be a beekeeper because I think honeybees are awesome. So those are some different things. So I was kind of showing you this in the hive. At the very bottom is a drone. Again, very round abdomen, almost fly eyes or a motorcycle helmet type of deal. So that is a male, and you're only going to have maybe 100 males in a standard hive. Then you have a queen. Typically there is only one, but there's been instances where there has been multiple queens in one hive. Usually a queen likes to be the only one, and she'll kill off the other queen by stinging it to death. And then there is the rest of the bees in the hive. Most of the bees in the hive are the worker bees, which you see at the very top. And they are female as well, and they are able to sting, but they're only able to do it once, while the queen bee can do it multiple times. And again, this is Apis mellifera, the European honeybee. So when we talk about bees being endangered, these bees were brought over in the 1600s for the reason of pollination plus other products from the hive, such as honey, maybe wax, maybe pollen for different medicinal values. There's a whole medicinal word that is used for anything that comes from the hive, and that's called apitherapy, after their genus Apis. So there is apitherapy. So really, honeybees are not an endangered species because they are not from the United States originally, and they need to be from the United States originally in order to be qualified for the endangered species list. And there's enough of these hives being managed around the United States that they wouldn't be qualified, of course, for being considered an endangered species. They have a lot of things going on, such as mites, and we'll talk about mites in a little bit. Pesticides being used in honeybee hives being killed off that way. So we do have to exercise some care when we're working with these bees and make sure that our hives stay alive. to the best of our abilities. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. So a lot of people don't realize within the state of Wisconsin, we actually have 400 to 500 different types of bees. 85% of them are solitary bees. Those are your mining bees or leaf cutter bees. And many of them are, I think it's like 70% of them within the United States are ground nesters. And they don't form a colony such in the way that honeybees do. They are solitary. You have a female, you don't have any queens, you have a female and you have a male and they mate. And the female goes on to produce a nest, but there's no worker bees that bring resources in. So like I said, mining bees, leaf cutter bees, some of your sweat bees, like the green sweat bees, are solitary bees. And then the other 15% of our Wisconsin species are what we call semi-social. So honeybees are social bees. Some of our green sweat bees fall under the category of semi-social, even though I just said some of them are solitary. And then of course, the next most famous bee after the honeybee are our bumblebees. And we actually have 20 different species of bumblebees within the state of Wisconsin. And I think we are up to around 10 or 11 species that are found within Milwaukee County. So I just wanted to point that out because that is really important to think about, that we are surrounded by such a large bee diversity in our own backyards, but a lot of people pay attention only to the honeybee because it does pollinate, and of course you can get honey from it, whereas none of the rest of our bees that we have in the state of Wisconsin have the ability to produce honey in large quantities for human consumption. So I wanted to point that out. We do have one endangered species in the state of Wisconsin, and this is the rusty-patched bumblebee. And we do have them in Milwaukee County as well. This is what the Wisconsin DNR are mainly looking for. And we do have other bumblebees of special concern, but they have not been listed. You can actually see kind of like the little crescent red shape in between two bands of yellow. That is a very distinctive reddish patch that make it the rusty patch bumblebee. They were very common bumblebee at one time, and I think they're finding that's mainly due to habitat loss that these bees are declining. In Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota are some of the last strongholds of where these bees can be found within the United States. So we're pretty lucky to have them here at Ware Nature Center. Now, incidentally, the queen rusty patch bumblebees do not have the rusty patch. They just have two large bands of yellow. So I wanted to point out a few resources on native bees if this is something that you are interested in. Xerces Society is a really good resource. It's Xerces Society for Invertebrate Conservation. Of course, Bumblebee Brigade, which I'm a volunteer monitor for, and then the Midwestern Guide for rusty patch bumblebee plantings is really great if you want to plant plants in your own yard or property, what have you, for bees. So these are rusty patch bumblebee foods, but it's good for all the pollinators that exist in your area. And this is the rusty patch bumblebee Midwestern Plant Guide. I also recommend this book, 100 Plants to Save the Bees, through the Xerces Society, and it talks about different plants that you can plant. And this is a great book. Heather Holm has at least 3 books out now, and she just came out with one on wasps, which is really interesting. This is an identification on native plant forage foods, and it also has pictures of the bees in there too. She's out of Minnesota, but this is applicable to Wisconsin as well. So I would recommend resources, these resources, and these are just a few of them, if you decide that you don't want to keep necessarily honeybees in your backyard, but want to encourage other bees to come into your backyard. And you can also, these are becoming more popular too. These are native bee houses. And again, these are for social, not social, solitary bees. We have 2 of them here at We're Nature Center, and they were given to us through a grant through the Bee Conservancy. And these little tiny tubes are made out of cardboard. Some places have bamboo. I would recommend, if you do decide to go the way of native bee houses, that you research on how to clean them. A lot of people don't realize that they need to clean these out year after year after year. So a pathogen or any toxin buildup that builds up in there is not in there, because that pathogen buildup can affect the bees that want to nest in there, and that kind of negates the reason why you're putting up the native bee house. So I wanted to point out, these are some different products that you can get from the hive. So we have honey, of course, that's very popular. Wax, which can be used for a variety of things, from candles to crayons, to salves, if you're into making your own medicinal salves, and pollen. Some people believe that local pollen decreases your severity of allergies because you're using local pollen. I don't believe there's any medical documentation that shows that that is accurate, but that is something that a lot of people talk about. However, there, again, you know, you might want to be collecting things from the hive, but there's a lot of upfront costs that are involved. So let's just say that you are getting started. And this is a rough estimate for your first year. We're not even counting in evaporator, the honey extractor. That's this big thing. And you can get electrical one, you can get a manual one, and you put your frames in there like I saw or showed you earlier, and you cut the wax off with a hot knife that's holding that honey in. And it's like a big centrifuge, and it spins it to the sides, and that's how you collect your honey. So that's, I'm not sure on the cost of that, because I don't own my own extractor, but that is, you're talking probably at least in $1,000 range for that. So it is a costly thing, unless you can find somewhere where you can share the cost. But like Hive Tool, Beekeeping, veil, smoker, gloves, you have to decide what you want to get there. Beekeeping, or the suit, it doesn't even mention the suit. A suit is probably going to cost you at least $50. Some people get these really wonderful ventilated ones. I don't have that. I just have basically straight canvas. Then you have to decide whether or not you want a Langstroth hive. And again, $200 for basic hive setup for a Langstroth hive. And we as beekeepers, the beekeepers that I have talked to, you want to start out with at least 2. Because if you have one that dies, then you have another backup to depend on or to have. You can go with a wear hive. And these are all different things to kind of think about. And the top bar hive, there's a local organization called Bee Pods, and their units are very, very expensive. And I've heard different stories. They're very, very hard to overwinter, just because there's air circulation over the top and there's air circulation under underneath it. And it's just hard for the workers to keep the cluster of bees warm inside because of that. It doesn't go vertical, it goes lengthwise. So that's something to think about, and I'm gonna talk about where you find out all that stuff. So this is a rough cost certainly isn't all the things that you should take into consideration. So if you're like, hey, this is going to cost me a bundle of money, maybe I should just, and I just want honey, that's all I want, is to find a beekeeper, a local beekeeper, that you can have your own supply of honey that way. Because again, it is a costly, I'm going to say, hobby, unless you have mass amounts of land, and then you might be more of not a backyard beekeeper or a hobbyist, but more of a what we call a commercial beekeeper. So those are all things to keep in consideration, are the actual costs. So you still want to be a beekeeper. So there's a lot of different beekeeping books out there. And since we're talking with the Franklin Public Library here, this is one book, if I would recommend any books, is Keeping Bees by Ashley English. She has a whole homesteading series, including chickens, canning, dairy, and she has this beekeeping book. It has a lot of great information in it. It has awesome photos in it that demonstrate a lot of the different things that you'll be talking about, because some of you might be visual learners. Some people like to read text. So this has a good mix of everything where you can actually see what they're talking about as far as terminology, because there's some interesting terms to be used with beekeeping, and you'll be like talking to a beekeeper and you have no idea what they're talking about. So this is very, very helpful to start with that base knowledge. Read. Certainly YouTube videos are great as well to see kind of what people are doing as far as beekeeping. But I would recommend sitting down with this book if you are bound and determined to have bees in your own backyard. So the next steps. The next steps are, maybe you want to join a beekeeping club, such as the Milwaukee Waukesha Beekeepers Association. That is a good way to find a mentor. There are also Facebook groups such as the Milwaukee Urban Beekeepers Club. And I should mention, you have to decide what kind of mentor you want. So do you want a mentor who is a commercial beekeeper, or do you want a mentor who is a backyard hobbyist beekeeper? Because the way that a commercial beekeeper operates their hive is going to be completely different than how a backyard hobbyist beekeeper is going to run their hives. So you have to make that decision. Always ask how many years of experience a beekeeper has. That's really important too. You should not be getting advice from a first-year beekeeper, because they're still learning. I mean, even my mentor, Kent Williams, he has been a beekeeper for probably 30 plus years, and he's still learning every single day. So those are some things to also think about, going on Facebook groups like that and maybe finding a mentor that way. I would try to attend Beekeeper Association meetings if you can, especially, and I don't know how they're meeting, if they're meeting virtual, but once you read your book and you find out what all the terms mean, then you'll be more in the know of what is happening when they start having conversations. Check on your local ordinances. This is really, really important, because you don't want to try to set up a backyard apiary or bee yard and then find out from your city that no, that's a no-go and have a violation. Some places like the city of Milwaukee allow for beekeeping, but you have to go through a process of certification before you're allowed to have bees on your property. So that's something to think about as well. And then also have a dialogue with your neighbors. So when you are deciding on the place, and I'm gonna switch slides here. So this is my mentor. This is Kent Williams, and he is part of the Kentucky Lake Beekeepers Association. He's a master beekeeper. And I don't know exactly how you become a master beekeeper, but he works with the University of Kentucky Extension Office, and he actually has an extractor on his property that was given to him by the state. So anybody could come to his hive and extract honey out of by his house. You just had to give him a call and set up a time when you could go over there. But he would teach a beekeeping school, and some beekeeping schools are really expensive. His was only $3.50 a day. And that was for the lunch that they provided. And it was awesome because all the beekeepers' wives, for the most part, there were very few female beekeepers. They would bring all sorts of wonderful baked goods, and there's like 3 or 4 tables just filled with food. So I digress on that one. So again, when you're deciding to set up your apiary, you want to plan for at least a mile in diameter around where you're thinking about putting up your hives, and then extend it maybe to 2 miles. You want to make sure that you have enough forage for your bees close to the hive. If a good, strong hive that is hungry can possibly forage 6 miles away from their hive, but you want to make sure, especially on your own property, that you are providing food for them in the form of nectar and pollen. They need both of those things. Pollen is protein from the flowers, and the nectar, which they turn into honey, are their carbohydrates. So they run on those 2 things. So once you have mapped out your mileage and made sure that your bees have enough forage, and this is something that you can ask your mentor about, they can come and assess your property and make sure that you have the proper food sources, and you want to make sure that you have food running from spring all the way, into September, sometimes October. It really depends, again, on your area, but you want to make sure that you have food through that whole entire time period. So once you do that, determining that area, have a dialogue with your neighbors. Because you might have some neighbors who, even though you have a city ordinance that says it's okay for you to have bees, they might be like, no, it's not happening. Then they complain. So giving them honey, it sweetens the deal and makes them happy, especially if they make mead. I have a friend who his next door neighbor makes mead, and he brought over a jar of honey, and the next door neighbor was really excited. So you want to talk to them. Also, I should mention some places, if your neighbors have pools, outdoor pools with chlorine in them, honeybees are extremely attracted to that smelly water, and they go there for a drink. So the neighbors may be less than thrilled about that possibility. So those are some things to think about as well. Then you want to think about purchasing your equipment. And you can certainly purchase or make your own equipment. And then you want to time ordering your bees. And there are different places within Milwaukee County where, like my friend Robert, he works with some people up in Baraboo, and I order my bees from him. And then there's different breeds of honeybees. They all have their different quirks. Like Italians are known for being very gentle. Carniolans, which I like to use, are a little bit more winter hardy. And then you have to decide whether you want to purchase a nucleus or a package of bees, and learn the merits of both. So for say if you're a first year beekeeper, you probably want to start out with the nucleus. It's like a miniature hive, and I'm going to actually switch slides so you can see what it looks like. So off to the side here is a nucleus. It is 5 frames of bees. It's got its own queen in there. It's got workers. It's got eggs and broods. It's essentially a miniature hive, and then you add your other frames. Typically our Langstroth boxes that you saw back are 10 frames. I think some of them maybe 8, but we have a 10 frame system. So you get 5 frames in a nuke. They're a little bit more expensive than if you buy a package. So this is a package. These are actually a couple packages, and you can get them in think 3 or 5 pounds. I've seen come in a 2-pound one. And prices vary from year to year. So this lady is super excited about her packages. So the thing with the package, if you're a brand new beekeeper, is those bees really have to work very hard on building the wax structure inside the hive on those frames. They have to pull in a lot of resources to get that wax started. So that's really what is going to be happening your first year that you have, if you have started them with no wax on the foundation at all. Spend all their time doing that. So with a nucleus, all the wax is already built up. You're giving them kind of like a chance to work on more wax, but at least you have those 5 frames that already have stuff on them. They have to have wax on the frames before the queen can start laying. So, you know, you want her to have the ability to start laying pretty much right away. And again, your mentor can help you decide. And also you want to think about pathogens or things that can affect your bees. So dogs and cats can get fleas, bees can get mites, and these little 2 red dots are called Varroa Mites, and they are nasty little creatures. Until like the 1980s, we never really had Varroa Mites, but there was a shipment from out of the United States that brought them over. And what they eat is basically the fat of the bee, and they can spread diseases just like deer ticks do. We get Lyme's disease from deer ticks. These guys are a mite, and they are an arachnid just like our deer ticks, and they will spread pathogens. So again, continue to work with your mentor throughout the year. And then bees will not always adhere to the rules based on what is in a book, so get used to that. And you can actually get a notebook, and every time you do a hive inspection, you can write down what you're observing. So learn what to feed, when to feed your bees, and that depends on the course of the year. You might want to feed them sugar water. There's also fondant, which is kind of like a sugar candy, or pollen patty. And I did mention, learn when it's necessary to apply treatments such as oxalic acid for mites to knock your mite load down. And I don't want people to freak out about Varroa mites. Essentially every single hive, honeybee hive, has Varroa mites. It's just the amount of mites in a hive that is disconcerting. So that is something that I want to mention. And someone was asking about where to order equipment. Now there are various plans out there. If you're handy and you have your own like saws and things like that, own equipment, you can certainly build your own. But Man Lake is a company. There used to be more than these, just these 2 companies. Man Lake is a great organization to order your equipment from. Dedant is fairly local. They're out of Watertown, but they do an amazing job at shipping things as well. But if you want to drive up to Watertown and get your equipment, they also occasionally offer beekeeping classes through their website. And you can also order bees from them when you're ready to order bees. So they're kind of like one-stop shopping there. So Dedant is a great local place to get equipment from as well. So I know that was a lot, and I did not cover nearly. I could go on literally a lot longer with bees because there's so much to learn. I encourage all of you to go out there, try to reserve that book I mentioned. So if you do decide that you want to do beekeeping, it's going to give you a much better foundation than what I can do for you in an hour, because it's a lot.
So we do have a question from during the presentation.
Okay.
Paul asks, is colony collapse disorder unique to honeybees?
The answer is yes. And you don't hear about it as much lately for whatever reason. And I don't know if they ever found out the exact cause, because there's a lot of different things that can be contributing to colony collapse disorder. It could be mites. It could be the way that you're managing bees. I was reading something years ago, well, not years ago, because it was something that was discovered in like the early 2000s, that there was no one silver bullet that pointed directly to any one thing of causing colony collapse disorder. And actually there's a book that came out in like the 30s, and my nature center that I worked at in Kentucky actually had this really old book, and it's called The A to Z of Beekeeping by A.I. Root, I believe is the name, and it's like this thick, it's huge. And it was interesting because they talked about something that sounded very much like colony collapse disorder, but they had another name for it, and it happened in like the 40s. So this book, and I think initially came out in the 30s, but they would update it. And actually it was really funny because they were talking about giving honey to infants in order to have them eat the formula better. And I'm like, oh God. Of course, we now know it's not good to feed children under 1 honey, but that's just how dated the book was. And it was very interesting. But they mentioned something that sounded like colony collapse disorder, like in that book. So they encountered it years ago in like the 40s or 50s. I can't remember exactly when. Everything goes in cycles. And I think that's what we saw with colony collapse disorder.
Okay. Does anybody else have any other questions for Brooke? If you want to unmute yourself and ask a question, that's fine. Or if you prefer to type it in the chat, that's also fine, but feel free. This is that awkward time where it's like.
So I have a question for all of you. And you can, take yourself off of mute if you want to answer. So how many of you are actually, after doing that presentation, are still considering doing beekeeping, honey beekeeping?
I know I am, and I saw that you guys said that you usually don't get bees until January or February. So should we not really start working with boxes and whatnot and getting them all set up until like the winter time? Sorry, I have 2 small kids.
No, that's okay. You can get your equipment now if you choose. That's totally up to you. Again, yeah, you're probably going to start ordering. Some people put it in their orders. Yeah, they'll put in their orders like January or February. Now, of course, would be really late, and usually get your bees, and it depends on where you're getting your bees from, because they'll ask you your zip code, and then they determine the shipping time based on that. So whether it's April or May, and that's how it usually goes.
Okay.
And they watch the weather very studiously to make sure that your bees don't die if you're not getting them from someone local. I've worked with Rossman Apiary in Georgia on getting bees. I received bees through a grant through the Bee Conservancy, and they wanted to know my zip code, so they made sure that they sent them at a time where it wasn't freezing cold out in Wisconsin where it would kill the bees. So they are cold-blooded critters, and they're more active when it's approximately 55, like around 50 degrees or higher is their best thing. And queens won't even mate, go out on their mating flights, virgin queens, until it's 70 degrees or higher. So they won't do that mating thing when it's colder temperatures. So yes, you can get your equipment right now, or build your own equipment, whatever you choose to do, and then have it ready to go.
Okay, and I'm not sure if this was like a local thing to you guys. I was just Googling yesterday and this invite popped up. I'm actually in North Carolina.
Oh,
Oh, well, welcome.
hi.
I went on and I was looking to become, a part of beekeeping groups on Facebook, and this just popped up, and so I'll have to see if I can find local stuff around here.
So yeah, actually, this is a side note. Brushy Mountain Bees, which they are a beekeeping company, but they're actually going through a lawsuit right now. So they are effectively closed. I don't know what's going on about that, because I wear children's size beekeeping gloves, and they're the only beekeeping company that made gloves that I could actually wear. But North Carolina, my dad lives out in North Carolina, and they have an amazing amount of beekeepers that are out there. So I don't think you'll have a problem finding any mentors out there.
Okay. Well, awesome. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I don't know if I think, I'm not 100% sure, but what is the name of the place out in Asheville? It's a nature center. They might be a good contact for information. I don't know where you're located, if you're on.
We're about 30-40 minutes from Asheville, so I'll have to definitely look into that and see, for sure. And thank you y'all for putting this on. This was great.
Well, thanks for coming all the way from North Carolina.
Yeah, it was super easy.
There was another person, Darcy. She said that they are still, or she is still doing it. We have a hive in our maple tree. We have been letting nature be the keeper, but is there anything we should be doing for our bees?
So the bees that's really cool that they're in your maple tree. So are they actually in like the trunk area?
I'm not sure if she's still on.
She is.
Yeah.
Okay. So what you can do, is it Darcy?
I just unmuted, yes.
Okay. So are your bees in the trunk?
Yes.
Okay. That's really cool.
We have the classic Winnie the Pooh hive.
I will say, if they are filling up that colony, a way that bees naturally split off, and because they're a super organism, they work together collectively. So they're considered to be a super organism, which I think is interesting. And what you can do for them, of course, is to plant flowers for them for foraging. It's always great for you to have enough forage for them, not using pesticides or herbicides or anything like that. But also, I mentioned, they're a super organism. It is natural for them to split off. So what happens is, when they feel like they're full enough, they got enough resources, they do this thing called swarming. So if they swarm, what is happening is her daughter, the queen's daughter, is going to stay behind, and she is going to take over that colony in your maple tree. And then the worker bees are going to be scouting and looking for a new location before that. So then they will leave with the old queen. They'll take resources such as honey from that colony in your tree, and they might go to another location. So something to keep in mind is, you might see swarming behavior. You might see a cluster on one of the tree limbs. That's their natural way. If you want them to go off naturally, that's fine. But if you join any of those urban beekeepers associations or whatever on Facebook, you can let them know if you have a swarm, and some of them will come out, because that's like freebies. And for them. And that's, some may charge you. I can't speak for every keeper that's out there.
We've already had a couple swarms, and we have a guy that really is excited to come get them. But we had one 2 days ago, and our neighbor came and got him. We had like 3 neighbors trying to get bee boxes. So we don't have trouble getting rid of them when they swarm.
Okay. I just want to give you a heads up on that. That's something that might happen.
But I just want to make sure I try to plant bee-friendly food, and I try to plant things that'll blossom. Like you said, we're in a colder, I'm in California, but it's Northern California. So we have a winter for sure. And obviously they're hibernating, but I try to make sure, that there's something always for them that they like.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously they must like it because they're still here, right?
Yeah. And how many years have you had them in there?
Well, we moved away from this house, and we moved back 3 years ago, and they've been here for at least 3 years.
Oh, wow. So they're doing good.
They seem to be.
They seem to be happy. So.
They're everywhere. We're planting an orchard, and they come right out and get busy there. And I have lots of lavender, and they love my lamb's ear.
Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's a good plant. And it smells good. It reminds me of cotton candy.
We have lilacs, lavender, we have wisteria they love. So hopefully I don't need to get them anything else maybe.
It sounds like they are very well taken care of.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. Any other questions lingering out there?
I have a question.
Sure.
So we have, we're in Wisconsin as well, and we had come across like a beekeeper on Facebook Marketplace who was going to be selling like his entire hive set and everything along those lines. And at the time, he had 2 additional people ahead of us. So they sold off the hive, but we've been looking at like Marketplace and options like that. Is it safe to buy a hive from another person like that? Or are we better off buying a new, like, do we have to worry about disease in there? Or is that something that needs to be a concern for us?
The answer is yes. So not that beekeeper, and if you have a mentor, I would have them look at the equipment for you. I would not just purchase it on sight unseen, because there are different pathogens and like viruses that honeybees can have. And a lot of that is stored in comb, the wax comb. And you don't know how old that comb is. You don't know if those bees have had chalk brood, or if they've had, you would want to learn how to test for American foul brood, which is really bad. Actually, if you have American foul brood, you basically have to burn your whole entire hive because it is so contagious. European foul brood is a little bit easier to deal with and have your hive bounce back if you discover it. So you can deal with that with treatments. But again, like you don't, dog. So like if you have a brood box, just the boxes without the frames, you can gently take like a blowtorch and torch the inside of it to like sanitize it. But as far as the wax foundation and everything, it's like I'm on the fence with that because they can harbor different pathogens, and you should replace your comb after a certain time because the cells keep on getting smaller and smaller and smaller because of the pupation. The cocoons get stuck in there and it gets darker and darker and darker. So eventually you want to have them replace the wax foundation on there, and you might want to throw out the frames. And you can just do a straight sheet of wax foundation, but there's also this thing called Plasticell, which has a coating of wax on it. If I had my way, I would not deal with plasticell because that's adding more plastic into the world, which we really don't need. So straight sheet foundation that's made out of wax would be like the best thing. But again, it's kind of like a buyer beware. I would be more inclined if you have a lot of experience as a beekeeper and know what to look for as far as those things, the various viruses and that kind of thing. I don't know.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. I know we just met today. I actually met somebody from like Appleton who has like, he's been beekeeping for like 20-25 years, and he was at like our store buying like extra fabric for it, and I'm like, oh well, I'll just like come over, and he's like, oh yeah, come over whenever you can. So I think I found a mentor today on accident. So
Sounds good.
Does anyone else have anything else they'd like to ask? Feel free.
Everybody reserving the book from the library.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we have we're the only library that has the bee book by Heather Holm
Oh, wow.
in the system. So we have that here at Franklin. And then we definitely had the Keeping Bees book. There was a number of them in the system. So
Okay.
can put that on hold right away. But yeah, if nobody else has any questions, I think we'll let Brooke go. Again, thank you so much, Brooke. This was great. We've had a lot of thank yous, and this was a really great program. So lots of appreciation. And thank you everybody for attending from far and wide. This is pretty great. And again, if you need to reference back for any reason, this will be up on our library YouTube page sometime tomorrow when I can get it downloaded and edited a little bit. So you can get to our YouTube page from our website, which is just franklinpubliclibrary.org. So thank you guys for attending, and thank you so much, Brooke, for all of your expertise.
You're welcome. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a good night, everyone.